Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining me here today. I am your host, Jared Taylor, and we have a full panel, which I'm very excited about. I'll give everyone a chance to introduce themselves in just a second. Whenever we do the panels, I kind of go down the list. So we'll start off with everyone just kind of saying name, title, company. We'll start with Linda, then Sarah, and then Bo.
So I'm Linda Smith. I'm VP of Marketing for ProgenyHealth.
I'm Sara Strom. I'm VP of Marketing at 2030 Health.
And hi, I'm Bo Hatter. I'm one of the 4 partners at Sage Growth Partners and the Chief Marketing Officer.
And I think what would help is we'll start out with we'll kind of go reverse order now. Bo, if you could just kind of tell us, I know there's a similar, with all of these roles, right? There's people can kind of understand, maybe how the role goes, but I know every company is different. Talk us through, just kind of give us that 1 minute spiel, Bo, on your core focus in this role. And then we'll give each person that opportunity too. And I think it'll set a lot of context for our conversation here today.
Yeah, I was involved with Sage when it was formed in 2005, but joined the firm about 12 years ago to build the equivalent of a full service agency within Sage, sort of extending, the research and strategy chops that the firm had begun to build in healthcare.
Yeah. So 2030 Health is a pretty fresh startup. We've been in business for about a year and a half. And so I'm a marketing team of 1 right now. Looking forward to growing that eventually. But I've had the pleasure of working on brand related initiatives my whole career. I've been a part of 3 different brand transformation efforts at different companies. And so brand is something that is ultra familiar to me and something that I'm really passionate about. And we're doing a lot of fun brand efforts at 2030. So I'm excited to tell you more.
So ProgenyHealth is a maternity and NICU care management organization. And essentially, we are experts in maternal and infant health, which is absolutely critical in today's world. And my job and my team's job is to work with our experts, our in-house subject matter experts, to really tell our story in a compelling way so that our customers understand what we do and decide they want to work with us. We also work on internal communications as well, but it really begins with that compelling ProgenyHealth story.
Well, thank you each for the context. We can kind of kickstart the conversation from here. For the questions that we have specific questions today for each of you to get your kind of point of view, but we'll also have some general questions and everyone can kind of tack on their 2 cents. We'll kick things off we'll go Linda, Sarah, Bo, and then we'll reverse it for the next question. And then we'll dig into some individual questions as well. So Linda, if you can get us started, can you share some kind of tips that maybe your company has implemented in terms of company branding experiences, maybe highlight some of those most successful visible efforts that you've been implementing?
Yeah, I think maybe a good place to begin is to share a little bit about what I experienced when I first got to Progeny. It was clear in those early days when I was listening to some of our client meetings that we were highly regarded by clients. They were singing our praises. They were renewing their contracts. We had very high net promoter scores. But what I heard from our sales team was that we were not as well known in the larger health plan universe. And so we had a brand awareness issue, not a brand loyalty issue. And one of the very first things that we decided we would do is lean in on that 20-year history we had, which we saw as a competitive advantage, especially with so many startups that were entering the maternal and infant health space. And we decided that we were going to advocate and educate our target audience rather than try to sell to them. Because we knew that if they understood the difference we could make for their members, specifically moms and babies and their families, we would be able to have a much deeper conversation with them. And yes, we could get to a place where we have a contract with them. But it really all began with deciding that we were going to be thought leaders because we already were doing that in our space. We just needed to formalize it. And that really became our guiding principle for everything we did to promote our brand. So I think that if I were to say to somebody who's getting started, think about what your competitive advantage is, whatever that might be, and think about building the story around that rather than trying to do everything and trying to be everything to everybody. find your sweet spot and really focus in on that.
Yeah, so 2030 Health is a comprehensive obesity disease management platform. And we are founded by Dr. Rajesh Agarwal, who is a renowned bariatric surgeon from over 20 decades of experience in the obesity care space. So, what we're really known for here at 2030 Health is clinical excellence. And Linda talked about, know what your differentiators are. That's really something that helps us to stand apart from a branding perspective. When you think about the clinical space, first, do no harm, right? And so there are other obesity disease management platform and care navigation solutions out there. Some of them are more direct to consumer. We're more on the B2B side today. Some of them are more founded by, tech founders or people that have been in the tech industry their whole career. So that clinical excellence is something that really helps us to stand apart. And if I think about one of the most impactful brand efforts that we've really been working on, we do a weekly newsletter that's written, curated, distributed by our founder. It's called the 2030 Health Weekly Roundup, and our founder shares perspectives on what's going on in the news in our space. And so that really helps to build authenticity, trust, expertise, and share more of that clinical excellence.
And last but not least, Bo.
Yeah. So at Sage, we recently rebranded. So this conversation is really timely. And now that we've gone through it makes me ask myself, why did we wait so long? It's been a really positive experience for us. And really what we did that was most meaningful is that we clarified and simplified our story. And it falls very neatly under the line of we help healthcare grow, because everything that we do is aimed at helping healthcare organizations grow through a combination of growth strategy and growth marketing. And branding, is a big part of that. So we did all of the discrete steps to re-envision the Sage brand.
I think a lot of people listening, Bo, like there's multiple reasons to rebrand, right? Unfortunately, a lot of times it's the negative reasons that come to the forefront. But let's talk about like Sage rebranding. Was not you guys were everything was going well. This wasn't like we need to rebrand to enhance our image, right? So I would love your point of view into why have a rebrand in the first place when it's not coming from a negative standpoint, right? This was strictly for a positive deal. What kind of went into your thought process and the team's thought process to say? Because a lot of companies are thinking this at home right now. Should we do a rebrand? What went into that process?
Yeah, I think it came down to two factors, clarity and impact of our message. So a lot of folks weren't really sure who we were. They would work with us in research and not realize that we did marketing. They'd work with us in marketing and not realize that we did strategy. And so we're, sort of an interesting hybrid of things. And so it was really important for us to bring that clarity. And at roughly 20 years tenure, we had a lot of stories to tell, and that added impact to the message we could advance. We couldn't have done that in the early years when we were struggling for acceptance and to have a seat at the table. But now we have a lot of stories to tell and a lot of proof that we've started to bring forward on the new website through case histories that our clients have very generously been willing to work with us to produce.
And Bo, if I could just chime in there, I mean, I've worked with you guys for several years before and after the rebrand, and you guys have always been known for helping healthcare companies grow. But I think this rebrand is really helping to bring that word growth to the forefront. So I'm really excited for the rebrand that you guys just launched.
Yeah, we've gotten tremendous amount of positive impact. The website visits have soared, and the anecdotal feedback from people like Sarah, who've known us for a really long time, has been overwhelmingly positive. So we're happy we did it. It was very hard to carve out the time to do it while serving our clients. But, I think that an investment in branding can yield some really good results, and we're seeing those.
And this, we can kick this over to Sarah and Linda as well. Kind of a part two to the branding question, right? Is how do you, when you're doing this rebrand, how do you look at it from, what's the good blend, right blend of internal versus external resources when you're looking at that investment and rebranding? And we can kick it back to you after, Bo, for your take, but we'll go Sara, Linda, and then Bo for this one.
Yeah. So my opinion on this is that brand isn't something that can fully be outsourced. I think it's really important to know that. But working with the right agency can really help to support and bolster your brand. So something that I like to say is brand is not your logo and your colors, although an agency might help you to develop those things. Your brand is a promise that you make every day to your customers, and to your employees and to your partners and to your prospects. It's the collective sum of every single interaction that someone has with your company. So I think finding the right talented agency to support your brand can be really powerful, especially for small to mid-sized companies and startups who don't have all of that resource in-house, or maybe they can't invest in a team yet for that. But I've worked with Sage across several companies, and one of the things that I've always appreciated about working with Sage is that you guys have a really good pulse on what's going on in the healthcare market. So you know how to help create a brand that is differentiated and really trustworthy. You have a pulse on, everything that's going on out there, and you can help brands to stand out from everything that you're seeing. So getting that external perspective can help just give you a bigger, broader variety of perspective on what's going on.
Yeah, and I would just chime in and say that the first thing to think about is that, like Sara said, it is a promise. It's really who you are to everyone that you interact with, whether that's your customers, your employees, and so forth. And so if you start on the internal side, your brand really begins with the people in your organization. And so you have to think really hard about finding the right people who have complementary skills, but share your values. They're committed to the same thing that you are. That's really an important part of the equation in building any brand. And then, of course, you've got to take the time to build your own marketing infrastructure so that you're a mature enterprise, right? That's able to communicate and organize and manage everything that goes into building your brand. And then, of course, no one does this on their own. You have to have not only your internal team members, but you have to have partners outside who you can trust that can help you get to that finish line. And that's why we work with folks like Sage who bring a certain perspective that we may not consider. But the onus is still on us to make sure that we have clearly communicated to them what we're trying to accomplish. So I do think that marketing teams have a responsibility to lay the groundwork. In the old days, we'd call them creative briefs or something along those lines, right? You have to do your due diligence so that when you're working with your outside partners, you're leveraging their skills and you're not wasting anybody's time. You're actually effective together because they have a better understanding of who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. So it is a balance, but it does begin inside, and then you've got to find the right partners. And I always say, and this goes for both your internal teams and your outside partners, you have to find out what people do well and then leverage their skills, their skill sets, and their expertise. And part of that is just experience in working with people, knowing what levers to pull in order to get something accomplished. So that's my view on it. It's an important balance, but a big responsibility lies internally with setting the stage and making sure your partners are well informed.
And Bo, I want to make sure we loop back to you kind of on the external side of things, because I know while you guys just went through this rebrand, I know you've been a part of it with helping companies. So give us kind of your point of view on that.
Yeah, and we're doing more and more of it. It seems like, the market is more willing to invest in branding in recent years. And I think some of it may be because clients have become more acquisitive and they're bringing more organizations together and need to find, the right overarching story to tell. But one of the big things that we do in branding and do this often is to find the brand value story. And we have a very detailed process that we use to do that, but it leans on the things that Linda and Sara just mentioned. You start inside the organization and you learn, what makes them tick, what their self-assessment is, what their hypotheses are about themselves and their markets. And then we get outside the organization and we take sort of I don't want to call it a skeptic's view, but we take sort of a third party view and get a look at the organization from the outside in, and where those things begin to converge is really where the interesting stuff starts to happen, and where we're able to put words together that create differentiation, that connect with markets in the right way, and have that brand value story begin to stand forward in the market.
Sticking on you for a second, Bo, what are some important elements that make a powerful healthcare brand?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't start with the obvious, which is that it's well known. I mean, there is sort of this thing that you hear every now and then where folks will say, "Well, we've got a great product," as if that's enough. And it always reminds me of the movie Field of Dreams and the James Earl Jones line of "If you build it, they will come." Well, that's not true. Folks need to know about it. I mean, there's a whole process that a prospective buyer goes through that begins with awareness and understanding and moves toward interest and then their first purchase, and then hopefully leads them toward a position where they become an advocate for your firm. It's a really important process to understand and get through.
And I'll kick this over to Linda. Linda, when it comes to let's say how are you measuring? We're sticking on the topic of brands. How are you measuring brand power and awareness? And why is this so important for a company? This kind of, I mean, I see this as a good point to kind of go in addition to what Bo said to some degree, but would love to hear your thoughts.
Yes, I'm going to start with the second part of your question, which is why is it so important? I mean, as we've already agreed here on this panel, your brand is everything, right? And if you are not true to that brand, nothing can get accomplished. So that it's vital that you measure the health of your brand as you're moving forward. And things like benchmarking studies, NPS scores. There's all different ways that you can formally measure the health of your brand. Now, having said that, most small and medium-sized organizations don't necessarily have those dedicated resources to do that sort of research. And so you have to have proxies. And in our world, the biggest proxy is sales. We know that our brand is gaining awareness when our sales are growing because it's easier for our sales team when they go out into the marketplace to tell the story. People already know who we are. There isn't that barrier that has to be overcome. When you have that general awareness, it makes the whole sales journey move a lot faster. So that's one of the proxies you can use. Things like people asking for your opinion, asking for a media quote, asking you to speak at conferences. These are all signs, leading indicators that you are becoming better known in your space, and therefore your brand is obviously growing. So I would say that you can measure it in many different ways. Even things as small as watching your LinkedIn followers grow is a sign that you are building awareness with your target audience.
I just want to play off of that for a minute, if you don't mind. Linda, you mentioned, measuring like speaking engagements or things like that. Like the more that your brand is visible, the more you get opportunities like that. One really unique way that we're measuring brand awareness at 2030 is a metric that we call PLOBs. It's a funny acronym, and I can't take credit for it. One of our other leadership team members used this at a previous company, but it's a funny acronym that stands for press-like objects, PLOBs. And for us, that's, of course, you can have press releases, you can have media mentions, you can have podcast opportunities like this, but we also bundle things into there like speaking opportunities at a conference, or maybe a LinkedIn post went viral and got a certain amount of likes or shares or impressions. So, it's you don't need to be spending thousands and thousands on advertising in order to measure your brand awareness efforts. You don't necessarily need to be doing these mass market surveys. While that kind of stuff can be really great, you can measure it through more organic channels that you're not necessarily paying for.
Sara, in a world where people's personal brands, not just the company brands, have become so critical, how do you get the team? Like, this is a problem I see with a lot of companies right now. They have some great news, and team members don't even interact with the post. They don't put their twist on it. They don't repost it and say, like, I'm so excited because of this or whatever it is, right? How do you get people, because you can't force them to get behind it. How do you get team members to become a part of the brand and not just an employee of the brand company?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite questions. And that's something that I've been super passionate about throughout my career is employee advocacy and awareness. So I think there's a couple things. Number one, as a human, I am very energetic. And so I like to infuse a lot of energy into our team and internal culture. And so we use our Slack channel as a way to sort of let people be in the know about either recent LinkedIn posts that we want them to engage with, or, let them know of opportunities that are coming up and get them really excited about those opportunities. And I never want to be in the situation where I'm, forcing people to act on our behalf on social media. But the more that you can exude confidence and excitement around these opportunities, the more that other people are going to play off of that. And so at 2030, we have several clinicians on our team. We really like to hear from them because they are, highly regarded in our industry for their expertise. So I'm always encouraging them to provide their opinion and expertise. And then for anyone, for sales, for customer success, we just really want to hear their voice. And there's so many different ways that you can encourage people to use their personal brand to support your company brand, whether it's using something like Chat GPT. Maybe they're not a writer, but you could give them something and they could put their own little personal spin on it. Or something that I just encouraged an employee to do the other day was our founder was featured in a video, and I said, just take a quote from our founder in the video and repost that. You don't necessarily need to be sharing your own unique thoughts. You could be resharing something that the company has stated. At the very least, be liking the post, be engaging with them. But it's even better if you can reshare it as an individual post on LinkedIn, because the algorithm really likes individual unique perspectives. I think a lot of it just goes back to energy and excitement. As the marketer and the marketing team, it's really our job to get people excited about what's going on in the brand.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, Sarah. And I would say, just as an addendum to that, ask your partners to also play a role. Sage, for example, our technology partners, we let them know we're going to be posting something, and we actually ask them to get involved in the process as well. So that also helps to amplify the message even further.
Bo, I'm going to kick over to the next question to you. And I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show What We Do in the Shadows, but it's like Vampire Seinfeld, basically. And what they do when someone's wrong, they put them in the circle and they all walk around and say shame to them to make them feel bad. So I'm going to have you do that. This is the equivalent of that, but with this question. From your perspective, what do CEOs, investors, and others often get wrong about branding?
There are a couple of things. Do I have to give you just one?
No, several,
Okay.
several ideally.
So a lot of it gets referred to as the soft stuff, and I believe that is fundamentally incorrect. I believe a brand that's well done isn't sales. That's another misconception. Branding and sales are not the same, and just as marketing and sales are not the same. But what we can do through branding and through marketing is that we can create an optimized sales environment. We can put the world in a position where when our clients are calling upon their markets, they're well known, they're well understood, they're well regarded. And that starts a sales conversation off in a completely different place. Another mistake is it's one and done. You do a great brand, there it is, and it'll live on and on. The brands are living, breathing organisms when they're done well, and need ongoing care and refinement. There's always opportunity to improve them. So, those are a couple of the things, but at the top of the list is that it's soft stuff. It really isn't. It's a business fundamental that needs to be well attended to.
This could be for everyone. We'll kick it over to Linda, then to Sarah. Bo, you kind of already answered it, and you can add your 2 cents on at the end if you still want to. How much more important is it to have a marketing-minded CEO these days with how important your brand was always important, but it seems like now if no one knows who you are, to Bo's point, the Field of Dreams comment, right? It won't matter. Um, Talk me through, Linda, like, and let's say they're not. Let's say your CEO isn't.
Mm-hmm.
How do you have that conversation internally without them getting very upset with you? And then, Bo, how do you? We'll kick it back to you last of how you have that external conversation where, hey, without in a nice way, get your stuff together in terms of marketing, right? Linda, we'll kick it over to you. Sarah, then Bo.
Well, this may seem very fundamental, regardless of whether they have a marketing background or not. They hired you to do something for them. And I was brought in to actually help to improve our marketing. So you hope that you can, to a certain degree, lean on that a little bit when you're working with your CEOs, that the CEO that has hired you. And I was very lucky because even though the founder and our executive chairwoman, who was the CEO at the time, was part of the hiring process, she said, "Do what you do best and tell me what you need from me." And honestly, I've been very fortunate that I landed in that kind of environment because I was able to really make recommendations, explain the rationale behind why we were doing certain things, and they were on board. So I've never really had a situation where the CEO was against the marketing or improving the brand. I think they all understand at different levels how important that is and that you have to start there. So maybe somebody else can share a different experience, but mine has always been that I've been hired to do a certain job and they're entrusting me to make sure that I get that job done.
Yeah, I've had similar experiences. I've worked for founders that were developers, product people. Our current founder is a bariatric surgeon. So none of the people that I've worked with have necessarily been marketing experts. One of the resources that I love to share with founders and CEOs, there's a book called Founder Brand by Dave Gerhardt. And I realize that not every company or startup out there has, a leader that is the original founder that is ultra passionate about it. But if you do have that, this is one of the best resources that you can read. It's a relatively new book. I think it was published like 2 years ago or something. And it really just guides the founder through the importance of using their personal brand to grow the company brand. I won't give away all the secrets of it, but they have it on audiobook and you can purchase it on Amazon, and it is one of the best resources available. It sort of explains marketing at a 5th grade level to founders who aren't super familiar with marketing.
Yeah, it strikes me that as we look at the opportunities to work with clients, it's sort of two-leveled. You've got the CEO and you've got the product, and there's a saying that nothing will hasten the demise of a bad product better than good marketing. So you want to be able to get past that, and then sort of the second step in it from our standpoint is there someone who's really good, like Linda and Sarah, in that job that we're going to be working with on a day-to-day basis, who can advocate with the CEO and be able to. You may not always get every decision that you want rendered exactly as you want it, but at least for it to be given a fair hearing, and so that the merit that you're advocating for is being taken into consideration. That's where we're able to do our best work. And when we don't have a great counterpart to work with, it's very difficult to get to that same level of work.
As we start to wrap up the conversation here, I have a few last kind of talking points I wanted to go through, really around the future of the space, and then advice from each of you for startups. So, Bo, we'll stick on you and then go back to Sarah, then Linda. Looking ahead, what's the future of branding look like? What trends should companies be aware of and stay on top of as we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I would always start a conversation like this with fundamentals will always matter. They became fundamentals for a reason. And if we get too far away from them, we're going to drift from optimal performance. A couple of other things that I think, I don't know that I'm the best prognosticator in the world, but I think we're going to probably see more personalization and customization of messaging that'll be facilitated in some measure because of the advances in AI. And I feel like there's also a trend that's emerging where the market seems to care a bit more about social impact, and mission and those sorts of things, and that's really valuable, and something that we can use in brand value stories to make sure that our client organizations are well understood and appreciated.
And Sarah, would love to hear your thoughts. Feel free to add on to what Bo said or say something different.
Yeah, so I think future and trends, what Bo just said about mission-oriented brands is where I was going to go with this conversation. We are in the business of healthcare, and there is no industry like ours that could be so closely tied to missions. And so I think the brands and the companies that have a really strong mission and purpose behind what they're doing are the ones that are going to win. And so some examples of that I see in healthcare, just for 2030, for example, we are on a mission to eradicate obesity. That's a very clear, bold, strong mission, but it's a mission that people can get behind because it's something that impacts such a huge amount of people in our country. Other brands that I've seen in healthcare are brands that are ultra focused around the politics of abortion care right now. Maybe they're working with nonprofits in that space and they have a really strong stance on something. Whatever it is, get behind your mission, and you kind of want to create this army of people, whether they work for your company or not, who are also behind that mission because they'll be supporters of your brand.
Yeah, and I would just add, all of that is so true. That's how we operate as well. We're really a mission-driven organization. But beyond that, I would say one of the things that's been interesting for me to observe over my career is that I have noticed that as there was this big emphasis on the digital landscape and data analytics and things of that nature, it came at the expense to a certain degree of creativity, I think. I think it has affected some of what we see out in the marketplace in terms of communications. But I think that branding and creative messaging is experiencing something of a resurgence. I really do. I think that there is a renewed interest in this area because people understand that when they can tell their brand story in an effective way, it elevates the entire organization. It helps them separate from the competition. And it really allows them to tell their story in a very personal way that is compelling to the people they're trying to influence. So I think we're going to see a resurgence in this area. I really do. And I think if I were giving any advice out to a young organization starting out in this area, I would say number one, don't try to do everything. Pick one or two things that you can do really well and focus on those. Get your sea legs in those areas, and then you can expand your horizons. And the second piece of advice I would give as it relates to the future is don't change course too quickly. It takes time to build an engaged audience, and you have to stay the course. And you can't give up. There is something to be said for making a nimble pivot when you need to make a change, but not at the highest level. Give your audience a chance to catch up to what you're trying to communicate. So I guess that would be my view for the future.
I'm going to answer this last question and then give each of you a chance, but I'm going to add my take onto it too. So really around what advice should would each of us give a startup that wants to establish a strong brand presence? I'll take it from the media side of things. Know what's paid media and earned media, and I get a lot of pitches for case studies. And let me talk about our latest product. And I understand from a company perspective why that would be great for us to talk about it and cover it. There needs to be like that, if someone was in the weight loss space, they're commenting on GLP-1s and like, what's the upside? What's the downside of it? Then they can talk about their product. But I get a lot of pitches that are straight just do a case study on what we're doing. And that we end up turning most of those down unless we can come up with like we tell people it's a case study. And then really just along with leveraging your external and internal teams, be also great at playing the algorithm when that content goes out from that external, resharing it, putting up with your own twist, and then creating that plan to continuously put it out from there. we'll kick it over now to, I'm going to do Sarah, Linda, and then we'll end with Bo on that same. What's your one or two pieces of advice to startups on branding?
Yeah. So a lot of startups are either strapped for cash or are really trying to be mindful of their spend right now. So my advice would be you don't need to spend thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on ad campaigns to build a brand that people know, love, and trust. Focus on channels and opportunities that you can grow organically. So there are three things that I would advise startups. Number one, employee advocacy on LinkedIn is free. Maybe other channels where relevant. Maybe your brand is more active on Instagram or something like that. But that is free, that is easy, and it's a really authentic way to build brand credibility. Number two would be use your founder and or CEO's voice in the market. They often know the most about the space that you're in, and if you employ clinicians at your company, that can be another really good, easy, free way to empower them to use their voice, whether it's in the media or on social media. And then the last one might catch some people off guard, but in-person events are still a really, really powerful way to build your brand. And while people may be pulling back a little bit on investing in really big trade show booths and things like that, even things like small cocktail receptions or a one-on-one coffee meeting can leave a huge lasting impression on your brand. So those are the three things I'd recommend startups focus on right now.
If I were guiding a startup in this area, the first thing I would advise is to think about that audience before you say anything. What is it that's going to actually move them, that's going to motivate them to take the action that you want? And in most cases, it has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with your company. It has to do with what you're going to do for them. And so that's really where you have to start, is to ask yourself, how can I communicate the benefit that this prospective client can enjoy by working with us? What can we do for them that will literally change the way they've been, in our case, handling maternal and then really, I think once you think about that fundamental, the other side of this is really to continue to work your internal audiences. By that I mean your employees, and beyond your employees, your board plays an important role. They can be huge, especially to a startup. They have connections, they know people, they can help amplify your message. So use your boards and their connections as you're growing your organization and your brand.
Yeah, Jared, your comment was like catnip for me, so I apologize. I'm going to come in behind it. But that whole notion of understanding the difference between persuasion and news is a critical one. And you know, there are four different channels, of course, to get information out. You have your own channels where you can drive emails out. You have your social channel, which you own, and you can have full control over what's being said. There's the paid that you've described, and then there's the earned, and it's called earned for a reason. It's newsworthy, it matters, it has legitimacy, and we shouldn't be looking to journalists to do advertising work for us. We should respect their jobs. So I think that's an important thing that a lot of companies get wrong. They want to send out thinly veiled sales materials and call it news. It's not news. But if I were going to make one suggestion, you know, if you were going to do one thing early on, you know, to elevate your brand, it would be to invest in a foundational piece of content, of thought leadership that represents your thesis. It's sort of your Jerry Maguire manifesto. And then understand that it applies across all four of those channels. If it's done right, it has a measure of newsworthiness. If it's done right, it'll be well received in your owned and social channels, and it'll play like gangbusters if you do webinars and other forms of paid promotion. So, yeah, I think that those are usually dollars well spent, and they don't have to be extraordinary sums of money.
I just want to quickly add too, it's getting harder and harder to get your brand out there. I'm sure you've all seen this, but like in LinkedIn in particular, just changed their post setup where you get this little tiny thumbnail if you try to push people off of LinkedIn onto your site or onto, you know, your blog or anything like that, which now pretty much every piece of content looks the same on the feed. So they've kind of forced people to say, all right, start doing some videos, start doing some images, start doing some blog posts on LinkedIn. But to your point, what all of you said earlier, right? Just continuing to stay on top, like what's the emerging trend, what's changing, and and also I'll just quickly add for those that are, because we've worked a lot with a bunch of different firms, external firms across the board, right? We've worked a lot with in-house, um, and I'll talk up Sage, so Bo doesn't have to. Make sure when you're doing your research into these external companies, it goes without saying, but like see how much they truly care and are not just telling you what you want to hear, to because PR in general has a very there is some, for some firms there is a negative, like they sign someone to get them and then they kind of repeat the cycle over and over again, right? um, I've done some stuff with Sage over the years, and when you talk with them, whether it's coffee in person or something, they really care about fundamentally understanding your business. And Bo, I mean, not to just, I'm not going to go on and on about how great you guys are, but just kudos to you and the team for actually like truly caring about the organizations that you work with, and helping them grow like smart.
Yeah, I mean, if you deliver authentic value, there's never a downside to that. You earn the trust of people, and it builds long-term relationships that are mutually beneficial.
I love it. Well, hey, thank you all so much for joining me on the podcast here today. I love these panels. This will go down as one of my favorite panels. This was a good group, and we'll have to do it again in the near future.
Thank you.
Thanks for organizing it, Bob.